Hello, welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Ari Hirschberg, Community Practice Lead at the Exchange Lab. I am talking with Alex MacLennan, Assistant Deputy Minister of Enterprise Services Division, to continue the conversation from the Digital VC live stream with CJ Ritchie on Digital Workplace. What does it mean? We had almost 400 people attend the live stream and received many questions at the session. I'm happy to be able to go a bit further with you on this afternoon. Welcome, Alex. Thank you for being on the podcast.
Thanks, Ari. Thanks for having me.
So to start, over the past 18 months, what has changed in your world? Do you have any sage advice on how your leadership has changed?
Well, I don't know if I can offer sage advice. I think over the last 18 months, so much has changed for me, like it has for everyone globally. It's been a fascinating, challenging period of time on so many fronts. I think, in the context of the conversation we were starting with CJ around digital workplace and sort of roles of leaders and others in the workplace, it's been a time of tremendous change for me. So when the pandemic started, I was the Deputy Cabinet Secretary in the Premier's office. I was supporting Cabinet. Interesting time from a decision-making standpoint. Things were moving very, very quickly. Lots going on. And I transitioned to this new role in September of last year, so just over a year ago. And that was a fascinating experience on a whole bunch of different fronts, particularly from a leadership perspective. Prior to that, working at Cabinet Operations, I was part of a small team. There was a very small group of us. We were in a small set of offices. My team, it was varied, but less than 15 people at any given time. And in this new role, I now have a team of 350 people. I have almost as many executive directors as I did in my last team. And so a significant change of scope and scale, for sure. I'm someone who, as a leader, have been lucky enough to be able to rely, working in small teams with lots of direct personal contact with people, one-on-one conversations, and lots of team interaction, lots of team building. And I landed into a new role where by the time I'd arrived in that role, most people were no longer working in the office. So now, a year later, I've still not met most of the people that work in my organization. I've met a lot of them. I've seen many of them on Teams calls like we all have, but I haven't really had that experience of being in the office with my team and interacting with people on a day-to-day basis. And from a leadership perspective, to be honest, I was coming into this role with a bit of trepidation because it was such a significant increase in scope and scale and the size of the team. And I had questions for myself about how my leadership style was going to scale to that many of people, never mind the question of whether or not they're in the office. So I would say over the last 18 months as a leader, I've learned a tremendous amount. I think I'm still learning on a daily basis about what it's like to be a leader, well, just to be a leader in any way, but certainly in this context. In the realm of non-sage advice, a couple of things that I do reflect on. I was worried about scope and scale, and I think obviously, like anyone else, I was challenged by the idea of starting with a new team in a remote way. And what I've learned more and more over the last year, in particular, is just the importance of fundamentals. It doesn't really have to do so much with questions of whether people are in the office or not, or whether they're sitting near to me or not, or whether we're on a Teams meeting or a phone call. Those things have an impact. They're not without impact. They change the dynamic. They change the experience. But I think, you can ask other people how successful I'm being, but on the things that I feel I'm being successful with, it really does go to fundamentals. It is about, and the things that I get, positive responses from people on are, efforts I make to communicate what's happening to people across the organization in multiple different forums and different channels. I spend I spent a lot of time trying to make space for one by one type conversations with my entire leadership team on a frequent basis. Those, while sitting on a Teams meeting is not the same, the frequency of those interactions and the ability to be present for those interactions and to truly listen to people and absorb what they're saying and try to learn about them, that matters to people. I think I think vision and mission is always a challenge for any organization at any time. I do believe it may get a little bit harder when people aren't all in a room together. So I think that just reinforces the importance of clarity in communicating with people and really staying on point when we're talking about vision and mission, what we're here to do, why we're doing it. So communications is so much of it. Making one's self accessible as much as possible is a huge part of that. And I think I've also, what I've realized, and it's been funny, I've worked at 4000 Seymour, for those who don't know, quite a large building in town, capacity of almost 900 people usually. There's probably a tenth of that have been in there over the time. But I still go and walk around the office, and when I'm in the office, and see who's there, and I have nice connections with people. One of the things I have really enjoyed, and one of the powers of the technology, is the ability to have quick interactions in real time with people to get business done. So for instance, it's great for my, it would be great to have some more of my team around for those interactions in the office. But, of course, in a building that size, it's actually like it can be a 5-minute walk to get to the other side of the building. Whereas sometimes I can just ping someone and say, hey, are you there? And can we have a quick chat? So I think there's that would be my initial learning is one, there's challenges. There's things that are different. There's things that are more demanding than they once were from a leadership perspective. It can be exhausting, I think, but sticking to fundamentals. And then if you can put that focus on fundamental aspects of leadership, how can you use the tools that we have creatively to actually enhance that experience? And I think there's definitely opportunities. I think we're all learning about that still, right? Like I would say in most cases for most people, and a lot of the conversations I'm having, we are largely working the way we were pre-pandemic with a digital interface. We haven't really, I think, got to that point of evolution to say, okay, post-pandemic, when we're dealing with a mixture of work styles and work environments, how do we use these tools effectively? And how do we change the way that we interact to make the most of those tools and find the most opportunities for connection and collaboration? The one thing that is sort of an unknown for me, Ari, and it's something I'm reflecting on, is I think there's lots of things that are easily doable in the day-to-day. The sort of normal business of the day, the sort of the happy times, the good times. What I'm not so certain of is what is the really challenging stuff like as a leader? And I was having this conversation with my divisional management team today. It's like when those points of like really, really hard conversations, or even people experiencing tragedy, which happens, right? I think that's where we'll be really challenged as human beings to find ways to appropriately connect and appropriately care for one another. Not to say that we can't do it, but there's some learning to be done there, I think.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I'm very curious about what the community is going to create in the new world when we blend this world that we've lived in the last 2 years and the future world. I think it's going to be an interesting time.
I agree. And one of the, as you know, like part of the role of my team is to provide tools for the rest of the public service to help enable their work. And one of the things that we talk about quite frequently is it's actually pretty easy when everyone's in the office, and it's actually pretty easy when everyone's out of the office. It becomes much more challenging when there's a mixed environment, because then you start getting questions I think we need to reflect on, and leaders on, how are we going to ensure equity in that environment? How are we going to ensure access? Are we going to ensure that people aren't marginalized in conversations or interactions? Those aren't technical questions. Those aren't about the technology. They're about us as human beings, about the way we deal with other people, the way we lead. And I think we've got, I think we've done incredibly well. I think many organizations have done incredibly well over the last year and a half. I think from that perspective of maintaining the health of the organization, I think our biggest challenges actually lie ahead of us. There's also massive opportunities there.
Agreed. So what do you believe will be different in the workplace of the future?
And we sort of alluded to this question a little bit when we talked with CJ before. Part of the answer is I don't know, still waiting to find out what it looks like. Some of the things that do strike me, some of those things I was just speaking about, right? Like our organizations are about relationships. I was actually, as I'm about to speak, I'm thinking about a colleague and a guy I worked with in the past. I don't know if you know Alex MacLennan, who's a service design leader. And I remember we were doing a project together, and we were talking about, it was actually focused on an intranet, corporate intranets and ministry intranets. And we often talk about silos between organizations. And Jess had something I think that was really profound to say. He said, basically, we didn't say this, but the in brackets part is, an organization is not a real thing. It's a construct, right? It's something we put a name around, we identify it, but it's not a real thing. You can't draw the organization. The organization is made up of people. Silos exist between people who may happen to be in an organization. So I think that is a great challenge for any organization. It always has been. It will continue to be. I think that when we think about the organization of the future, not just the public service, any organization, that's one of the questions we'll need to wrangle with, right? We talk about the workplace, and if I was saying to a bunch of children in a kindergarten class to draw where people work, they might draw offices. They might draw an office building. That might be a sort of archetypal thing that people would represent. I think that the future is something different. The future is a mix of things. It's less easy to put your hand on, to put your finger on. It's harder to articulate. And yet the fundamentals of the importance of human relationships and communication are essential to that workplace. So in that workplace, of that digital workplace of the future, digital just being one aspect of the workplace, right? It's not exclusively digital. I think we almost you sort of rework that, and that digital terminology is you could call it modern workplace, which has more progressive digital aspects to it. We are going to have to wrangle with those connections with people in a different way than we have in the past. In the past, we may say, hey, we're going to collaborate. We're doing a session. Let's get into a big room with a bunch of Post-it notes and some markers, right? In the future, we're going to have probably more elegant, mature, subtle approaches to address all those questions that I talked about before. I think we're going to have to, like many organizations, rethink space in an office. The office, and I was reading something recently, I think the office sort of as a construct we understand it goes back to the Royal Navy in the 18th century and was structured around that sort of organization, or at least one version of the office, as sort of a Western European version of the office. And that's an old construct, right? In the future, it's got to be something different. So we're going to have to think about, okay, questions like, what do we do with people in different locations that we still need to come together and have those relationships? So one of the ideas that I'm finding really compelling is a lot of organizations internationally, globally, talking about shifting from workplace to culture space and the importance of shared space in the building of those relationships. And not to say that you can only build relationships in a physical location. That's not true. But I think there's an intangible, there's a magic that occurs when people have that opportunity to interact with one another. And so I think that idea, and then I think the second idea is we can tend to talk about people and their jobs and their roles and sort of put I'm an assistant deputy minister, and assistant deputy minister is this type of job. But in fact, I have a bunch of different types of jobs, right? I've got work that I do that is very about interacting with people. I've got work that is very much about being in my own head. I've got work that is about dealing with external stakeholders. I've got work that's about planning, about conversations. It's a whole mixture of things. So I think it's getting a more refined understanding of the work that we do and how the digital space and the physical space are assets to those different aspects of our roles. And I think that's a new conversation for most organizations based on the reading I've done. And so the fact that we haven't cracked that nut is not surprising. I don't know that many have, but I think that's going to be the conversation in the next few years. And I think if I can just add on that, I think we're seeing a bit of a pendulum swing. And so you may have heard some examples, but I think IBM Canada being a really good one, where IBM apparently is divesting themselves of all their physical workspace. I can't speak on behalf of IBM. I feel like that's probably primarily an economic decision. And they're looking and saying, listen, we don't need to pay for this workspace. We've proven that people can work from home. And yes, that's true in the short term. And I wonder how long before IBM and other organizations are probably never going to go back to the footprint they had in the past, but maybe asking those questions of like, well, okay, do we need to bring people together? What does that look like? Do we need a physical footprint again? So I don't have the answers to those sorts of things, but I think those are the types of questions we're going to be wrangling with.
Yeah, me too. It's such an interesting conversation. Like Google said a few months ago, they were going to start calling back a lot of their staff.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. No one's actually figured out the model. We're all in a period of transition here, right?
So do you have any suggestions for how to support those who are struggling to transition to this new world?
Yeah. Well, yes and no. I don't know the answer to that or how to solve it. I sort of come back always to the same place. This is a change initiative, like any other change initiative. And anytime, we always have that sort of whole trope we send out, change is hard. Yeah, that's true. And change is hard for lots of good reasons. I always think that change, the primary reason that change is hard is not a rational one. It's an emotional one. And so I think that is kind of where the focus goes when I think about how we all support each other. Like I just said, we're in a time of transition. We're all in a time of transition. So we're all going through change. No one knows what it looks like on the other side, right? There's no one that knows what it looks like on the other side. So that's creating lots of emotions for lots of people. My sort of starting point in any scenario, and this one's no different, is you start with empathy, right? Like, let's first of all take a moment to think about the experience of those around us, the people that we're dealing with, whether that's your colleagues, whether that's your supervisor, whether that's someone reporting to you, whether that is your deputy minister or a member of the public or whoever it might be. Starting off with a moment of empathy to say, okay, we're all going through something that's changing here. We don't know where it's going. We don't know what it looks like at the end. Let's think about that experience for others. Let's have a moment of empathy. Let's create space to listen and see what's going on for other folks, and maybe take a moment to learn and try to gain more understanding of where we're at and where we think we might be going and what that experience is like for people. So, I think there's very specific things that people might be challenged by. You and I talked a little bit about technology. There might be people that are uncomfortable with the transition to technology. I'm not entirely sure of this. I would premise that they're probably not as much troubled by the technology as the change to the technology. And so I think if we can all get into that place where we're thinking about the fact that this is an emotional rather than rational experience, there are rational elements, but it's emotional, and then start from that place and understand what people are going through, well, that will give us more of a hint of how we support one another. We could easily become pedantic about it and say, oh, well, people need training on tools. Well, great. Sure. That's probably true. Is that going to make the change easier? Well, a little bit. Is it going to solve it? No, I don't think it's only that. I'm dealing with this question a lot with my team as we're finding ourselves pushed down a pathway around the technology that we'll use to support government, and not just as a result of the pandemic, but even just things like the transition to cloud technologies and all this change that's going on around people. It is not just about shifting technology, and sometimes that's going to shift business processes, right? And that has implications for real human beings in the work that they do. And so I think I think if we can step back from that moment and recognize that it's a period of transition and change, and that is an emotional experience for people, the starting point is always building understanding for the individuals involved and what's going on for them. And then let's deal with those things. We've got some big system-wide things to sort out, and that where we need more supports, we need more tools. But let's take that technology example. If I'm struggling with change from that emotional perspective, because let's take an example. I've been in my job for 10 years, been always doing the same thing. Maybe it's paper-based. Maybe it orients around my office, and you come to me and think I'm being resistant to that change because I struggle with technology, and you're going to show me how to use Teams. That's not going to be a helpful interaction, right? First of all, we need to start with the why and what's happening and where we're going to, and then maybe I've got some openness to the more technical aspects of that, or the process of redesigning a business process or thinking differently about how I do my work. So I think generally that's probably what I would say about any change, but I think it really applies here, because we also have to keep in mind that, this has been a challenging period of time, that last 18 months, for so many people in so many different ways, in very personal ways. And folks are struggling with resilience and energy and emotion. So, let's be human beings about it as a starting point, and take it from there.
When you say change, we haven't seen a change like this in generations.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I don't even know if anyone fully understands the scope. We're not done yet, and we don't know what the full scope of it is.
So what role do you believe accountability and trust have in a digital workplace?
Yeah, it's funny as we're having this conversation. Every time you ask the question, I know we talked about this. It's like you could just take the digital out of this, and the answer would be the same. So, I think I was actually interesting timing. I was yesterday a moderator on a panel for the Learn Network Week through the Public Service Agency. So, big learning opportunity is provided across the public service. And I was the moderator of that conversation, and it was a conversation about trust. And so really, really great for senior leaders in the public service with lots of experience. And of course, trust is fundamental. Like the themes that came up again and again around trust was going back to that conversation about relationships. Like if we accept the idea that there's no real organizations, there's just tens of thousands of individuals that are connected together to get work done and to build service outcomes for the public. Their relationships are fundamental to how we do that. So, I think at one level, trust is really, really critical there. And I think we're all challenged by that, because maybe some of the mechanisms by which we built trust in the past have changed. Like, how do we build those relationships? It's a new experience for people. So I think that I think there's that aspect of it for sure. I think on the accountability front, it's a really interesting one. I think the conversation on accountability is going to blow wide open, and there's lots to discuss. First of all, as public servants, we just have to accept fundamentally that is just part of our role, right? We have this very clear accountability to government, and a clear accountability to the public, and a clear accountability to deliver and to deliver responsibly, and to deliver in the interests of those that we're accountable to. So that's one thing that doesn't change. How we talk about, interact, exchange our understanding of that accountability is really critical. And I love conversations about trust and accountability, because I always think the other part of that is also empowerment, right? And so there's this sort of like, I don't know if it's two sides of a coin or a Venn diagram or what the appropriate thing is here, but there's a direct relationship there, right? And I think one of the conversations we had yesterday that was really interesting was about how in most cases we don't start fully trusting one another in any human interaction. Like hopefully we're starting off with like a sense of good intent and the hope that we can trust someone, but we also take a leap of faith with individuals all the time. So as we shift to a place where we have more models of how people work and how they interact and more complexity in those relationships, I think there's a test of our courage in that, in how willing we are to take a leap of faith on one another. And by that, I mean everyone, right? Like all of us, because we all have these interconnected relationships. Because only by doing that will we be able to validate whether or not we have trust in place there. And the relationships will rely on that so much. And we may not have that. I think there is a bit of trust that develops through familiarity. And we may struggle as much to like rely on familiarity as a way to build that trust. So I think it's gonna require more leap of faith from people, and then related to that, it's that accountability empowerment piece. Yeah, empowerment's great, but empowerment is completely relied to accountability, right? It's that whole chain. It's like, I need you to take care of something. I'm going to trust you to take care of it. Thus, I'm holding you accountable for that thing. And if I'm truly holding you accountable for that thing, then you're empowered. But if we break that trust, then that whole chain falls apart, right? And so, we talked about this theme earlier in the podcast, but I think it's a really important one, going back to human relationships and understanding as individuals, how are we going to maintain trust, ensure trust, build trust, and not just with one another, with the public. Because if we again go to that accountability question, at its core, we're here to ensure that the public receives services. And so we have clear accountability to them and a real importance in maintaining their trust in us to do that. So, it's almost like it becomes a meta conversation quite quickly. But I think it's just so fundamental to everything. And I do think there's that aspect that we need to keep on of just the level of courage that it takes for everyone to make sure we maintain that.
Yeah, yes. So what are your thoughts about organizational and individual health in this work? What is the role of leaders in this space?
That's a fantastic question. And I think one that we're all wrangling with, and is certainly, as I mentioned, I've been putting my head into a lot of the research that's going on as many organizations globally are making this shift. And let's call it out. Mental health is an issue. It's an issue pre-pandemic. It is an issue globally. It has been an issue for some time. I think organizations are becoming more and more keyed into that as an issue. But pile on the experience of the pandemic, totally different scenario. And so I think there's so much going on there. And the things that stick out for me, as I feel incredibly lucky. I've had, despite all the challenges, I've got secure employment. I like my work. My family and friends have largely been safe and healthy and happy. I work and live in an amazing place that is just feel so privileged to be here. But even within that space, when our sort of like microcosm of privilege here in Victoria and British Columbia, there's lots of people struggling. And they're struggling with the impacts of tragedy on their lives. They may be struggling with the impacts of job loss, and simple things, not simple things, I shouldn't say simple, things like isolation is a huge issue for everyone. So we talked earlier about this like importance of the dynamics relationships between people. And so many people have been denied the normal sort of interactions that they would have had. And that's happened in the context of what can be significantly stressful experiences for people. Now, there's some people that luckily might have all the supports they need around them. There's other people who the work environment and the people they work with are a significant part of of what constitutes their support system and well-being. And because, all of us, we spend a significant time at work, right? Maybe even more during the pandemic. And yet people are feeling, and not just within our public service, everywhere, more distant, more disengaged than ever. People are bringing fear into that scenario and really are challenged by that. And so I think it's chronic, and I think that it is. When you talk about the role of the leader, I think there's only so many things that a leader in an organization can solve. But I think connection is a starting point. And I have to admit, for me, I'm a generally fairly introverted person. Connection, like as much as I love people and have deep, intimate relationships with people that I care about, I sometimes struggle to reach out and connect with folks. But I have to recognize that I have to, right? And we all do in some way. And I think this is one of the challenges that we're all concerned about when it comes about whatever that future model is, whatever that workplace of the future looks like, is how do we make sure that we maintain those connections? Because that organization is made up of people, and their health and well-being is, well, first of all, it's sort of a human aspect that just needs to be taken care of, but also is critical to the health of the organization, right? If people are struggling, the organization is struggling. So I think that's sort of my thoughts on a personal level. At a leadership level, or even just for any of us, I think organizational health is really critical. And I don't know if one of my writers I enjoy, a guy named Patrick Lencioni, who's written a bunch of books. I don't know if you've written his, I think it's his most recent, called The Advantage, where he talks about organizational health, and I'm paraphrasing here, being a key differentiator for sort of the strategic outcomes of an organization. That idea really resonates for me. And what I find interesting about that is how do we get signals and measures for that in a different way? Like, I know in my experience, I'm sure it's been others, where I've been in the office and my team's been challenged by something. Well, you walk in the room, right? You can feel it. You can feel it when you walk in the room. You don't have to ask anyone. You can see body language, you can see facial expressions, and you can see that people are struggling. Now move that into a Teams meeting where people may or may not have their cameras on, where they may have a camera orientation that makes it hard to see their face, or not enough lighting. Where do your signals come from that people are doing okay? How do you ensure that there aren't people that never turn their camera on, that you never see, and you don't know how those folks are doing? So I think those are the types of things that I don't have an answer for and that I'm struggling with. We're within my division, we're talking about, well, all of these issues, but even some tactical things about creating some new standards and approaches around how we're going to do team meetings and what the expectations are for interaction and having cameras on and things like that. Not simply just for the point of having a camera on, but for the ability to see another human being and go, okay, I can see your face. How are you doing? What's going on? And I have to admit, I struggle with this myself. As I mentioned at the beginning, I've got 350 people on my team, haven't seen most of them before. I come out and do all staff meetings. And if we were in a big hall or something like that, I could see what was going on, how what I was saying was landing for people, whether they were enthusiastic or think I'm an idiot. I don't have those same signals in this environment. I can't see people's faces. I don't know how they're reacting. So that is challenging. And if my job as a leader is to take action, make statements, do things that bring together an organization around a shared mission, a shared vision, and to ensure that we have all the tools in place to perform and to deliver on that thing. To be honest, this is a gap area for me right now, and I think it is for many other people, and we're struggling with it. We're doing our best, but I don't think we have the full answer in the long term. So I think, to the two parts of that question, at a personal level, the role of the leader in maintaining connection at a organizational health level, I think we need to think about how we measure and how we evaluate and what are our signals on whether or not the organization is healthy and the people in the organization are healthy.
Well, my last question, you've already kind of alluded to it. Patrick Lencioni is a wonderful writer, but is there another book or a podcast that's kind of guide you through these past 18 months?
Oh, so many. My Kindle is my prized possession, and I spend a lot. I don't, not so much, ironically, not so much of a listener to podcasts, but I listen to some, but I do read a lot of books. There's a couple that stand out that maybe I'll refer to, and one, and if I can just like name drop someone, and someone I know you know well, Reuben Carter, was telling me for ages to read Team of Teams by Stanley McChrystal. And I hadn't, as much as I enjoy Stanley McChrystal's TED Talk. Finally got around to it. And really interesting because I feel like a lot of the issues we've talked about today, not that he's got the answers to them, but I feel like there's something in there. And when it comes to teams and how we interact with one another and that understanding of mission and vision and how to bring people that are physically, emotionally, temporally disparate together, I think there's some rich material there. But I would say that more than that, the one that has really stuck out for me, and I actually can't remember if I read it pre-pandemic or not, but it's probably the book over the last few years that's come back to me more and more and more, is How to Do Nothing by Jenny Odell. And I don't know if you've read that book. If you haven't, I highly recommend it. It is Jenny Odell's an artist and philosopher, and the subtitle of the book is and I can't remember exactly what the title was, but How to Do Nothing, and it sort of is a reaction to social media, and you sort of pick it up, and you get you almost anticipate you're about to get a discussion about how everyone should disconnect from social media and turn off their phones. And refreshingly, that wasn't her message. Her message was more along the lines of, hey, start paying attention. Like, not to what the feed is telling you to pay attention, but pay attention to what you want to pay attention to. And then she starts expanding that and tells her own story about how wanting to pay attention got her into bird watching and as an activity, and getting into bird watching slowly connected her more to the ecosystem in which she lived. And then being connected to that ecosystem connected her more to the community that she lived within. And so just like I found a wonderfully poignant book, but just that idea of being present and paying attention and thus becoming more connected to the place where you are. And, just going back to the earlier conversations about connection, I think that's something that at least I need more of in my life, and I bet other people do too.
Thanks. I'm with you. Team of Teams, both the TED Talk that he did to lead me into wanting to read it, were both excellent, and the book is rich. How to Do Nothing is now on a list for me.
Great.
Any final thoughts?
No, I just, I always sort of go back to the probably my overarching theme in any conversation is like, let's start with people. Let's go back to the people aspect of this and recognize that there's a bunch of human beings going through challenging times, and starting with empathy is always a good place to go.
Thanks again, Alex. I really appreciate you taking the time to come out and be on the podcast.
My pleasure. Thanks, Ari.
Hope you enjoyed the conversation on digital workplace. What does it mean? And thanks for listening.